Well, it is perfectly planned because we follow on beautifully from this. So, we're from the University of Hertfordshire and we work with primary school teachers to provide professional development in science, which is a core subject in the primary curriculum. So whoever wrote that guide doesn't know what they're on about. It's for everybody in the primary curriculum. So for those of us who work in science education, a key driver for many years has been concern about the proportionately low number of girls, as Fiona just said, choosing to study science post-16 and then to enter careers in STEM, so science, technology, engineering and maths. And there's been a lot of research to find out why that might be, and a huge amount of investment to get more girls into STEM. But, you know, as listeners of the Archers, actually we note that young women are really happy to dive onto tractor bonnets, up sheep birth canals, flaunt their plate meters, carry out experimental trials on herbal lays, mob grazing, and consult cheese-making academic texts, which are very thick. Now, Ambridge sisters roll up their sleeves and engage in scientific activity and careers with an enthusiasm not represented in the general population of the UK. So we decided to investigate this Ambridge STEM bubble using recent research from King's College as our lens. So, 76, Jim Callaghan, in a really influential speech at Ruskin College, Oxford, asked, why is it that such a high proportion of girls abandon science before leaving school? And the data from 1976 graduates in engineering, which is the year I was making my O-level choices, clearly shows why I don't have a science qualification. Because there just weren't the role models around. Girls weren't doing it. Now, a study of the BBC archives, Archer's archives at the time, reveals that Ambridge was right to be concerned. It appears that Callaghan was right to be concerned. It appears that there were no female characters in STEM employment at that time, apart from those defined as farmers' wives. The other women earned their living as shop assistants, barmaids, and hotel receptionists. Even Pat Archer, prior to her consciousness raising in the early 80s, really fitted that stereotypical farmer's wife mould. Now, since 76, a shed load of money has been thrown at this issue by successive governments and industry. It would be nice to think this has been done in the cause of equality. There are multiple reasons why girls should be encouraged to think that science is for them, political, social and individual reasons. But the reason that over £100 million has been invested in the last 10 years alone in interventions to address address the issue of insufficient numbers of STEM professionals in the workforce is really to do with economics, not equity and social justice. There are simply not enough young people altogether choosing to study STEM after the age of 16 to meet the future demands of our economy. As Whiteleg says it, the future supply issue would be really solved if girls just chose physics in similar numbers to boys. So to find out if those millions of pounds have had an impact in Ambridge, we use the STEM classifiers from the Department of Business, Education and Industry and the Higher Education Statistics Agency to code the occupations of the Ambridge employed. In Ambridge, there are currently 4 female farmers working at managerial level, a female engineer and 6 women working in food production. If the definition of is extended to thinking science is for them, Kirsty Miller, with her environmental activism, should be included in this list of STEMinists. To allow a valid comparison with UK statistics for the female proportion of the STEM workforce, medical careers can't be included, so we happily omitted Kate's holistic stuff. And we can't include Amy Frank's midwifery and Anisha's veterinary practice, but they've moved, so. So how does Ambridge compare to the rest of the nation? Well, it's doing better. Nationally, a difference has been made, but despite an 18% increase in the number of women doing science and maths A-level, or girls doing maths and science A-level in the last 7 years, girls and women are still underrepresented in most STEM subjects at every stage of the STEM pipeline, with a consequent impact on employment. So the nation actually is behind the Ambridge curve. Bravo, women of Ambridge. So what's been going on in Ambridge to buck the national trend? There's always been farmers' wives, daughters and female neighbours in Ambridge. So what's happened to change the employment choices of the current generation? Is it the impact of 40 years of intervention and investment into women in STEM? Is it a simple reflection of the increasing proportion of women in the workforce altogether? Or are there other sociological reasons? For Emma, Clary and Susan, the decision to work in the chicken factory or dairy is clearly driven by limited opportunities and economic need. But what has persuaded those women with higher social, cultural and economic capital to pursue careers in science when research tells us that the problem of gender stereotyping in STEM careers is really persistent? Are the young women of Ambridge simply better at science than their male siblings? Look at the picture, daughter. You've got a BSc. You've got a BSc. They certainly have higher science qualifications, but their academic endeavour is often shown as a necessity to compensate for their lack of inherited talent compared to their brothers. Oh, you know, how many times do we hear of Johnny Phillips' affinity for stock and Josh's intuitive understanding of machinery? They don't need no university education to achieve in STEM. That's the girls have to do that. They have to work hard, those diligent girls. Other representations of STEM success in Ambridge don't seem to conform to that gender stereotyping that underpin constructions of science careers as clever or brainy, not nurturing, geeky. And they sit in opposition to girls' self-identification as normal or caring or girly and active. Both men and women in Ambridge experiment with cropping plans, breeding regimes, new technologies, and production ideas, systematically collecting data, analyse and communicating their findings. Even Tom eventually got around to completing his Nuffield report, and look where that got him. Now, the scientific method is alive and well in Ambridge, as recently demonstrated by Helen installing new cheese-making machinery. There's loads of examples. They talk about research. Gender does not appear to affect agency or identity in terms of the residents' enthusiasm to engage in science inquiry. Even Susan Carter, we don't know whether she's got an O-level in chemistry, but her approach to applying for the CAFEA manager job was entirely scientific. Her lack of qualifications didn't appear to hold her back.
Okay, so thank you, Jane. A useful tool.
That was my Susan slide.
Oh, was your Susan slide?
That's how you make CAFEA.
A useful tool to help analyse why a high proportion of women in Ambridge see science as for them could be Science Capital, which was developed by the Enterprising Science team, a 5-year project between King's College London and the Science Museum and funded by BP, which drew on the work of sociologist Pierre Bourdieu. Now, the concept of Science Capital can be imagined as like a personal hold-all that contains all the science-related knowledge, attitudes, experience and resources that an individual has. This includes what science you know, which might include any science qualifications, how you think about science, your attitudes and dispositions. For example, considering the possibility of distilling gin from a cheese byproduct, or Alice's confident approach to new technologies. Third is what you do, your everyday engagement with science. For example, putting a lamb in your Aga. Or evaluating the implications of an anaerobic digester. And last but not least, who you know. What family and friends you have with interest or careers in science. And there's plenty of those in Ambridge. Now, from the research, we know that only 5% of the population have high science capital, and those are the ones that are most likely to aspire to STEM careers and further study of STEM. And most of them are male. Now, the Enterprising Science team used a complex combination of data to measure science capital. Our approach was somewhat more simple and just relied on the 4 key questions that you saw on the previous slide. But we have taken a sample of 5 Ambridge residents and included them on a table here. There is a complete table in a very good recent publication which is available downstairs, just giving it a little plug there. But as you can see, it's the female residents of Ambridge that are topping that table. So, what conclusion did... Oh, I'll leave you a moment to have a look at that. Okay, so what conclusions did our analysis lead us to? We felt that science capital overall in Ambridge is very high because of the agricultural science which just pervades so many of the villagers' activities. In contrast to the rest of the nation, the young women of Ambridge appear to have higher science capital than their male counterparts. But the young women of Ambridge appear to have to gain academic qualifications while their brothers and other halves have an innate ability with livestock, crops and machinery. The residents of Ambridge are happy to read and accurately follow instructions for diluting chemical sprays, drilling linseed and experimenting with hydroponics. And Ambridge is a shining example of a community fostering the science capital of its residents, one which the rest of the UK might learn from. So those high levels of STEM capital are clearly having an impact on STEM career choices, especially for the young women of Ambridge, which we hope will in turn influence the next generation. But we asked the question, could residents do more to increase science capital in the village? So, Justin, how about developing a new science park so that those with a wider range of STEM careers take up residence and widen the scientific career opportunities for the residents of Ambridge? Alice, could you become a STEM ambassador and visit local schools to inspire the next generation of STEM workers? Fallon, how about regular Café Scientifique events in the tea room? And finally, where are those academic male role models to inspire Jake, Henry and Jack that academic study of STEM subjects is a positive choice? References? Thank you.
Any questions? Yes, over there. Oh, there's quite a few.
Oh dear.
Hello. You're talking there about the women having higher STEM capital, which is great. I work in IT and I'm very used to being the only woman in the room. And it's depressed me a bit about how much I match a lot of STEM stereotypes. I'm far more academically qualified than most of my male colleagues. And do you think it's partly that factor that women do need to show their qualifications because they aren't seen as having the innate abilities in the same way? And also, it's not quite the same in farming, particularly when you're part of a family, but often women are promoted for their achievements, whereas where men are promoted for their potential.
No.
Okay. Well, the research certainly suggests that. That's what the research into science capital definitely backs up that women have to work harder at it and have to prove themselves in a more formal way. That you're confronting that gender stereotype all the time, that this is more natural for boys to do and succeed at. I mean, it is, and it's interesting. I mean, the big shift in Ambridge came with Ruth, because she was the person who arrived, and there's a really great line from Julie Birchall? Yeah, I think, saying, it all changed when Ruth arrived, and instead of having a hand in an elven glove in the Argus, she had a hand up a cow. And that really did shift it, and you can really see that all of the, that suddenly opened the door to females really engaging in a very different way to the farming life.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, don't you remember Carol Gray coming in the 1950s? On her own small college.
Sorry, born in 62. I just hadn't started in 50. In the
Please tell
50s.
us about Carol Gray.
Go on, can you tell us? Tell us all about her.
Oh, Carol Gray, who became Carol Tregoran.
Oh, did she? Oh, right. Oh, it's exciting. Quick, give us more.
Some of us are old enough to remember her as Carol Gray. And she came into the village, and it must have been the 1950s, and ran her own small home.
see.
At the time, she was perceived, oh my gosh, it's a woman running her own business and running her own small home. But she then went on to be a very successful businesswoman.
And because when we put the chapter together, Cara wrote to me and said there must have been some women working in science, and there really weren't. We went in 76, going through the archives. There were successful businesswomen. That was a model that was accepted, but I didn't know. That's my ignorance. I'm sorry.
Just on a general point, though, you compared the statistics of students in Ambridge or qualifications with Ambridge and the rest of the country. Can you not compare it with the rest of rural England? Because I suspect it isn't peculiar when it's compared with rural areas.
We tried very hard, and we really couldn't find that data. I mean, it just doesn't exist. I live in a rural village, and actually, our village, we have about 4 farms around the village, and Ambridge is not representative of our village. So I honestly don't know, and we couldn't find that data. We did look quite hard.
I get on theory, because if you look at attendance at agricultural college, they call themselves universities now, but it is, I would suspect, 50-50 across the genders.
Yeah.
And there is a lot more female employment
Good.
in land-based industries.
And of course, Carol Gray Tregoran gave her a good basis for her later interest in growing marijuana.
Yes, of course. Yes, thank you.
Question at the back, and that'll have to be the last one for this paper.
We'll see.
Okay, I was just talking about Ruth and Pip, who seem to be missing from your charter people. Ruth, of course, with the college education.
We went for the under 40s.
Yeah.
Also does the research, also does a lot of exploring new possibilities, reading up about future developments. Pip is the opposite because she dropped out. She rejected the academic approach, but she still applies that method. She still looks at what's new, reads the papers on it, discusses it, and then wants to experiment. So maybe they should be added to your table as well.
Well, if you buy the book, you will find, many more residents of Ambridge, the younger population of Ambridge included in that table, and more than happy to talk to you over lunch about, how we worked out our STEM capital.
Thank you.
Thank you.